Our first session is going to focus on the future of meat and meatlessness, and it's going to be chaired by Mr. Dean Weiss, who is an AGS Councilor and a principal at Dean Weiss LLC. Dean, you have a big panel and a lot to cover. Good luck.
Thank you, John. Welcome, everybody. Hope you all were thinking about the future of food as you ate your swanky Manhattan dinner last night, big T-bone steak. But we're going to be talking about where this is going. And you'll notice we have one of our panelists on your program is not here. And I'm very disappointed, but Pat Brown let us know late yesterday afternoon he had a commitment at his company. He's based on the West Coast, and he just couldn't make it. He is the co-founder of Impossible Foods. I'm going to do the impossible myself and try to channel Pat. He and I talked quite a bit, so I know where his head's at, where he's going, and I'm going to use some of his slides. But I want to reflect back a little bit on one of the key constructs from yesterday, which to me is very, very important, and that is that even though we have all these issues about the future of food, social justice, sustainable agriculture, there is a technology path to get us to a very good place in terms of climate change and health. And Michael will be talking about the impacts of health as we go to plant-based, precision fermentation, and cell-based plants, which is the meatless direction for technology. And we have a very interesting presentation from Michael Russek, who has a cool product called Shrimp Box. And I think we could probably spend all day on each of their topics, but I'm going to give a little bit of background from Pat. But before I do that, the key construct from yesterday was our friend from Rethink X, who talked about the S-curve. Remember that? And that there's a disruption curve. It's proven time and time again. Look at cell phones, look at this, look at that. Technology starts slowly. We say, where's that going? And suddenly, boom, you move up the S-curve and then you flatten out. And that's what we're going to be facing. It's a disruptive curve of the livestock industry, which is a huge part of the climate impact today. Something like 15% of emissions just from what livestock belch out and the manure and so forth. And then there's a even bigger number that I'm going to show you that Pat has estimated. That's the impact of freeing up all that grazing land and the feed for livestock. So we're going to be talking about, okay, is that S-curve real? And can we convince you that we're going to be moving up that curve? What's that impact? And then how does it also affect our health? So that's kind of our theme. But yesterday, the S-curve pointed to those three inputs to basically create alternative proteins. That's really the technology. And there's three different pieces of that. One is plant-based meat, and Impossible Foods created the Impossible Whopper Burger, which was the pioneer for this, 2016. And then precision fermentation, and we have evidence of precision fermentation changing our food already. You probably don't know, but 50 years ago, rennet, which is a key ingredient for cheese, was 90% coming from the stomachs of young calves, veal calves. And that's how we created rennet for cheese. And in the 70s, the animal rights activists basically came along and in conjunction with scientists said, we don't have this anymore. And that led to basically a precision fermentation solution called Cryosin, I think is the name. And now 90% of all of our rennet that goes into cheese is now a precision fermentation. So this is happening underneath the cover, so to speak, with the ingredients, and we'll see that more and more move into the finished product, which is the food. So how many vegans here? Raise your hand if you're a vegan. One vegan, two vegans, okay, very good. So there you have it. If I could tell you that if I was kind of the head of China said, from henceforth you will all be vegans, we could solve this problem, right? But that's not how the world works. So what we're going to be doing is having scientists and entrepreneurs driven by all the money in venture capital, bringing forward literally hundreds of new products that we're going to move up that curve. And in 10 years, we think that it will be indistinguishable in terms of taste, price, and so forth. So what's on your plate, it'll taste good, be priced right, and we will basically eliminate our friend Elsie the cow and Ferdinand the bull. By the way, Elsie is about 50% of cows, Ferdinand is about 50% of cows. We're already seeing the disruption to the cow economy in the dairy side with soy milk and so forth. So we're kind of down this path. So that's a little bit of background. And again, I want to thank Jamie Arbib, who's he's not here now, but he was the Rethink X guy, and he introduced you to the S-curve and some of the implications. So I'm going to keep coming back to that. To me, that's, in my head, that's the Bible of how this technology disruption is going to happen. So these are some of Pat's slides. So animals is a big challenge for us. 45% of the ice-free land surface, many people would call it 35% of the total Earth's surface, is dedicated to livestock. And cows are the #1 impact in terms of emissions and even more land use, and particularly the cattle cow, not the milk cow, is big on land use because obviously milk cows tend to have a smaller footprint. But we can worry about pigs and chickens and goats and sheep later, but the cow is really our enemy in this case. And that's a lot of Earth's surface, and we think that there's a pathway to basically recapture that for wilding or other uses of the Earth's surface. And by the way, that's going to solve a big part of our whole climate change issue. There's the cow. There's 1.7 billion cows. And they've taken over in terms of the huge amount of the of our land use. This is going back thousands of years, of course, and as well as the other creatures that we depend on for livestock and for meat and clothing as well. And they outweigh everybody else. You can see the weight of the cows together is more than the humans, and so forth. This is probably the key finding from Pat's recent research. By the way, a little bit on Pat. Pioneer, started that company in 2011. 2016, only 5 years later, introduced the WOP, the Impossible Meat Burger. It's now at over 10,000 locations being sold, and you can buy at retail the Impossible Beef. It's mostly plant-based, but there's a little secret sauce in there, 2%, that's called a heme or heme, I'm not sure how that's pronounced. That's basically precision fermentation. That gives it a little bit more of the meaty flavor. And they've moved into other meatless products. Plant-based meat is still, they are the plant-based pioneer and plant-based leader. Pat moved back from a CEO, founder role a couple years ago so he could do more R&D. He's now moving very rapidly into, okay, how do we actually work with farmers to help, if this process is going to work and we free up the land, how do we actually make sure that that land gets rewilded? Let's find out carbon credit pathways for farmers and so forth. So he is still a pioneer. I'm just so sorry he's not here today. But the key finding that he did, and this is actually published research, is if you read all the UN reports of what does livestock contribute to emissions and so forth, it's about 14–15% of global emissions, and that's primarily the two top layers there. What has not been very well measured is the impact if we could convert this land use to non-livestock uses, and a lot of it is just let's let photosynthesis work, and it'll go from being a carbon generator to a carbon sink all around the world. And by the way, the land area, I think Jamie said, this is equivalent to the size of the U.S., Australia, and China combined. Is if we basically can put Elsie and Ferdinand to bed, and we'll give them a nice little nighttime story, we will free up just so much land, the equivalent of those three countries together. If you can rewild that or repurpose it, and by the way, I'm a transportation guy, I'm very interested in repurposing some of that for renewable diesel, energy fuels. We already see, obviously, ethanol is 40% of corn use now. Ethanol goes into your gas tank. But there's a blend issue of only 10–15%. But renewable diesel is a one-to-one replacement, and that comes out of it could be these crops that could be grown instead of the livestock use. But that's a big finding, and what that adds up to is literally half of all of, if we could accomplish this, and this is a what if, and we'll basically be able to accomplish 90% of that, because you just need less water, you need less land for all these alternative proteins. We'll basically be able to look at this, the size of this net number is half of the total targets from the Paris Accord. So if you think we're having, if you gnash your teeth about growth of wind, growth of solar, growth of renewables, which then have subsequent issues about, okay, where do we get the lithium? How do we get the parts? All the challenges we're going through with batteries. here's a pathway that technology can do that is driven by mostly private sector, private capital, taking chances to introduce foods, new alternative proteins that can replace and eventually be indistinguishable from meat. So that's the big opportunity, and the impact is much bigger than people have expected. So that's really good news, I think. Couple Kitty Hawk moments in this area. One was Impossible Foods, Pioneer, and you've seen Beyond Meat has had some challenges, but there are now literally hundreds of companies that are in startup mode or in revenue mode, and there's a whole new venture capital group. And by the way, at 2 o'clock, we have a very good panel. Chris is going to be moderating. 2 venture capitalists talking about here's in my portfolio, here's where this is going, here's all the interesting companies that are out there. We're on a roll. The other big Kitty Hawk moment just happened 2 days ago, and you probably read about it. Anybody read about this? The FDA approval of Upside Foods. This is the very first FDA approval of a precision fermentation solution. And Upside Foods, their chicken, was approved by the FDA. So that's the beginning of moving up the S-curve. Now, don't hold me to it that we'll see hundreds more in the next year or two, but over the next 5 years or so, we'll see that S-curve just completely accelerate the disruption. As that goes up, the cow economy goes down, because as you start to peel away the pieces of the cow that we now, the cattle raisers rely on for revenue, that means it puts the cost structure on what's left. And the last thing that'll be left is the hardest to produce with precision fermentation and cell-based solutions, and that's a real steak. But if you think about if a steak is maybe, I don't know, call it 50 pounds out of a 1,000-pound cow, that steak is going to cost a whole lot more money. And as we peel off the other, and cows are used for a lot of other things. The hooves are used for certain things. We get collagen, obviously the hides. The hides are going to be replaced ultimately by not synthetic, but alternative solutions as well. So that cow is going to be increasingly dear. There will still be cows, just like if you go back to 1902, all you saw was horses on the streets of New York, right out here. And 10 years, 15 years later, there's maybe one horse in the picture. So we've been through this transition with other animals, the horse, and people survive. The buggy whip makers turned into mechanics, et cetera. There'll be a lot of people disrupted, but this transition is just going to be really interesting to watch. But there's the impact on the globe, which I think is fascinating. Let's see. That's his mission. There's the delicious Impossible. Who's tried an Impossible burger here? Well, that's pretty good. Okay, keep the hands up. Now, keep your hands up if you loved it. About half. Okay. So we have a ways to go. We have some convincing to do, but that's okay. And what's fascinating is it's going to get cheaper too. So right now, the Impossible Burger is it's a premium against a regular burger, but it's going to get cheaper, and price parity is on the way as well. There's the land use from the ruminants, which is primarily, again, the cows. So that's the disruption. We actually have like 6 or 7 states in the U.S. that are going to get completely disrupted. It's already happening. If you're a dairy farmer right now, you're having a lot of trouble making ends meet, and the cattle farmers will start to face this as well. And we certainly have to watch out and plan for, and this will be over 20 years, let's say, if this technology actually does work with the S-curve, you can see where we're going to be affected. Obviously, northern India, some population centers. So what are they going to do? Well, maybe that'll be our Geography 2070 topic when we get to that. But that's the human impact and the societal impact. And of course, they're not all going to go away, of course. But that's the basic pattern. And as we start to repurpose, here's the potential for carbon sequestration in the U.S. and total CO2 storage per hectare is the big ones, areas of the red. So you see the southeast is the area where we have big opportunity to convert. And this will be through mechanisms like you're already seeing, like companies like Indigo Ag has got a CO2 program, and many others do, to basically actually have a small carbon credit market for farmers to say, we actually give you money every year if you'll repurpose some of your land and get to more sustainable ag. And that will happen, accelerate, I believe, as we free up some land. So don't go out and buy too many thousands of acres yet. It's probably going to take a while, and it's going to be a transition, of course. So that is my remarks. I'd like to turn it over to Michael. Michael, I'll let you do your own introduction and take it away.
Great.
Thank you.
To go forward, okay. Thank you, everyone. Thank you very much to the AGS and to the Columbia Climate School for inviting me here. And a special thanks to Dee Jordan, who is on the board of AGS and invited me. I'm in a little bit different world than the majority of the people here. I come from the global health perspective. I work for an organization called Partners in Health. We take a rights-based approach to providing health care to areas, very many vulnerable and under-resourced areas in the world. We're in about 12 countries, and we were founded by Paul Farmer, who is a giant in global health and sadly passed away in this past February. So a big shout out to him. I'm going to speak today about what has been termed the Planetary Health Diet. It also has been called the win-win diet because it causes great gains in healthcare, in personal healthcare, human health, and it also has a lot of implications for the planet health and environmental health. In full disclosure, I'm one of the 3 vegans here. I prefer to call myself a plant-based whole food diet. I've been on it for about 10 years. The main reason why I've transitioned to that diet is really around health, personal health care. But there is the added benefit that you don't have to have any animals suffer for your diet, and you can make a positive impact on the environment. Let's see if I can work this. Okay, so a group of scientists, the Lancet got a group of scientists together, and they asked the question is, can we feed a future population of 10 billion people a healthy diet and within planetary boundaries? So they got these scientists together to figure out if that is even possible. They came up with this commission approach, which they first defined what a healthy diet would be, a reference diet, and we're going to go over that diet in some details. And the 10 billion is very appropriate for this conference, since that will be the population, estimated population by 2050. And then if we find the diet that is healthy, can we do it within the planetary bounds? And then they also apply it to a food systems modeling framework and what would have to change in that system. Some of the things that would have to change is we would have to still decrease our food waste. We'd have to do some technological advances in our use of fertilizers and pollution, but we'll get into that in a little bit. So here is the diet. I hope you can, looks like you can read that pretty well. So the diet, the food got cut off a little bit, but the foods are grouped into emphasized foods, optional foods, and limited foods. And this diet is meant, it would be absurd to say that the whole world has to eat the exact same diet. So this is designed with a high degree of flexibility for cultures, but it is a diet very high in plant-based whole food and limits things like sugar, meat, chicken, and saturated oils, which are perhaps one of the worst things for your health is saturated oils, probably worse than sugars. But all these three foods are limited. Do I have a clicker here? No, I don't. The bottom three are limited foods, and the top five are emphasized foods. And you can see all the emphasized foods, except for fish, are all plant-based whole foods, really. And healthy oils are in that emphasized group. So what would be the evidence? What would happen to people if we all ate this diet? Well, it turns out just using hard evidence from cohort studies and if everyone ate that, if everyone shifted to this new Planetary Health diet, we would avert about 11.5 million deaths per year. That is 1 in 5 deaths would be averted. 22% of the deaths that occur globally would be averted. That might sound quite fantastic, but I guarantee you it's an underestimate. If the world went on this diet, you would see those kind of gains in decreased mortality, and there's a lot of decreased morbidity with that that goes along with that, better years of living without disease. This is a breakdown of this might be, I'm hoping this is a little bit of a surprise to people, because I think most people think the priority should be like we have to stop eating meat and animal products to gain good health. But really the message is from that analysis that they showed that if you ate that diet high in plants, the analysis shows what we really need to do is eat a lot more plants in our diet, plant-based whole food. And you can see this is the 11 million deaths, and they attributed this article in The Lancet, a different article from the Eat Commission, ranks what are the factors that caused the decrease in deaths. Number one is a diet high in sodium caused about 3 million deaths of those 11 million. That is averted, that diet high in sodium, if you eat a diet high in plant-based whole food, because most plants don't have any sodium. They're rich in potassium, which we need. A diet low in whole grains, diet low in fruits, diet low in nuts and seeds, diet low in vegetables. These are all causing between 1.5 and almost 3 million deaths each. Those 4 things. Those are all diet low in fiber, diet low in legumes. All those green arrows are pointing to the simple thing: eat more plants and you live longer. And it might, people took this data also and they tried to do some modeling. So it is modeling, but they tried to look at, well, what if you started that Planetary Health diet when you were age 20? It turns out the modeling shows that you would add at least 10 years onto your life. Men would add about 14 and a woman would add about 10 more. What if you started that Planetary Health diet when you're 60? Wow, you would add 8 years, the data showed in the modeling. That's a pretty good deal to get 8 more years on this glorious earth, if we don't pollute it too much. And then if you started this diet when you're 80, you would gain 3.5 years. So it's never too late to do this diet, and this diet is extremely powerful. There's a cardiologist, Kim Williams, and he was head of the American Cardiology Association, and he once said, ask your cardiologist what the most common cause of death in cardiologists is, and it's obviously heart attacks. And then he said there's only 2 types of cardiologists. There's vegans, and there's ones that haven't read the data. So you really need to, this diet is about plant-based whole food. So the second part of the commission is they decided to set some planetary boundaries on these 6 factors. And the greenhouse gas emissions, they're setting at 5 gigatons of CO2 equivalents per year. And that would mean that we really are at about that right now. So this shift to this plant-based diet would result in us not really changing our carbon budget, but we would decrease how much meat products we produce and livestock products we produce, but we'd have to make some gains, and you'll see in the next slides that we have to actually have to grow more vegetables to feed 10 billion people, to grow more legumes and things like this. So we're always going to have some carbon budget that goes to growing the food that we need, but you can do it in such a way if your diet, if the globe shifts to a plant-based whole food diet, mostly plant-based whole food diet, there is some ability to add some animal products in there. And if we have the meatless products replacing those animal products, we're even better off. And there's some things we have to do about cropland use, water use, together with this diet to keep within the planetary boundaries. And we'll get into that a little bit, but not much. Okay, this is perhaps the best thing to take a look at where we're at and where we need to go with the Planetary Health diet. If you look at that very top line, that is red meat, and the globe is the very, very top line, which is like a gold color, but North America is the yellow line that for red meat goes way out to about somewhere above 600% of what would have to go. Concentrate on the orange vertical line, which is at 100%. That's what we have to get to for the Planetary Health. So if you look at nuts, we need to grow a lot more nuts to be part of the Planetary Health if you eat the recommended daily allowance. So we have to, in some foods, it turns out like the bottom 5 are all plants. We need to grow more of them to to feed everyone with this planetary diet. And the top foods like eggs and starchy vegetables like potatoes and other things we actually have to grow less of, and red meat we definitely have to raise less livestock to meet this diet. This is just to kind of illustrate who has to change the most. And it's pretty obviously from this map that there's certain countries that are eating more than 100 kilograms of meat a year, and they're going to have to shift, and we can allow other countries to increase a little bit of their meat production. Meat can be, like in Africa, it can be an important source of protein, and along with fish and other animals that are harder on the environment. But I don't want to use the word moderation, because my message to my patients is that moderation kills. So next time someone says to you, like, well, I think the key is moderation. No, it's not moderation. It's the Planetary Health diet, which is not moderate. So we do need to shift. We need to use less fertilizer and less nitrogen and phosphorus pollution in these areas of red, and we need to shift that fertilization to more efficient using technology to areas which aren't producing enough food. And again, we need to grow those plants. So this is just to emphasize that it's not just a dietary shift. I would love it if we could really solve, if we all ate plants, we could just solve everything, but we probably have to do more than that. We have to decrease our waste of food. We have to cut it in half to get to the goals that we want to get to eat within the planetary boundaries. We have to use technology and increase our improved production practices. You could do that at a very high level where you close these yield gaps. So we're going to produce less meat in some areas, and we're going to produce more vegetables in other areas. We're going to phase out first-generation biofuels if you want to really reach all these goals. And then I'm going to end it there. I want to point everyone to this one website called nutritionfacts.org. They are a website that reads every nutrition study that comes out. There's 100,000 a year that come out, and then once a week they take an interesting subject and do like a YouTube video on it. They're like 5 minutes long, It's run by Dr. Michael Greger, and you can get some really valuable information on diet there and the facts on nutrition. These are the references that I used for this talk, and thank you.
Hi, my name is Daniel Russek. I am the founder and CEO of Atarraya. And, well, I come from a different background. I'm not a scientist. I'm not an academic. I'm not even a geographer. So I'm a shrimp farmer. And I think that one of the most interesting things about being here, and thank you for the invitation, Chris, is that I think that I'm happy that we are looking at the same world. Because in some forums, it's hard to, there's still some, I don't know, like questions about what is the impact about our diet and the way that we grow food. So I think that we here share that vision. And I think I would like to start with a reflection about this relationship between the knowledge about our food and our behavior and our attitudes. Because the more we know about our food systems, the less we want to eat, or the more guilty we feel about eating, which it's something that I think that when it happens on a societal level, it gives you a kind of anxiety, about what to do. So I would like to start talking about the how, and I think that we all share the idea that the problem is not specifically poultry, that the problem is not specifically cattle only. It's really about our food systems. And some of the lectures yesterday were pointing that out, and I like to hear that. I like that approach. So I think that we agree that we need to update our food system, and I would like to consider three aspects about our food system that we need to update. The first one is the industrial nature. And by this, I don't mean scale, because we're too many people, so we need to grow a lot of food. But I think that what we need to update are the tools, because industrialization means mechanization and chemistry. So we need to update those, and I'll say later how. The second one is the exclusive nature and the opaqueness of our food system. Because precisely because we don't know how our food is grown, when we learn about it, it's when we get anxious. And I think the third part is that our food system is it's optimized mostly for efficiency, or only for efficiency. So what I think that we should update this food system with is first, update our tools. And I think that the tools of biology are more powerful than the tools of chemistry or mechanization. Because when you have a team of engineers that are probably working on 5 years, 10 years of a project, 20 years, 30 years, I mean, how long before they get over budget and we lose patience, right? So nature doesn't have those kinds of constraints. Everything we see in nature is an answer to a problem. It's an answer to a specific challenge. So if we frame our challenges and try to match how nature has solved those, I think that we can find better solutions. The second part is make our food systems more inclusive and more transparent. One of the things I don't really appreciate about some answers are this secret sauce idea, because we should know what is in our food, right? So I would like that would be more transparent and find ways to protect IP, but I would really like to know what's in there. And the third one would be we should optimize for more than efficiency, but still we need to optimize for efficiency because we are too many people. But we should also consider nutrition, environmental impact, and to be honest, the whole experience of eating, because only improve our experience with food is can we break away from this anxious cycle of guilt. So I have my journey is with shrimp. So the clicker is here. And I think that shrimp is an interesting example of both the problem and the solution. So this is the geography of seafood. As you can see, it's straight. This map, they asked me for a map, so there's my map. It's from Rabobank. And as you can see, seafood consumption relies on trade. And I think that is kind of interesting because I think that relying on fisheries to get our ceviche is as smart as relying on herds of bisons or whatever to get our hamburger. It doesn't really make any sense. So this needs to be updated. In the case of shrimp, that is what I do for a living, is 95% of the shrimp that is consumed in this country comes from other countries. No, Mexico, where I'm from, Ecuador, India. So I started 17 years ago. There was a hurricane, more maps. There was a Hurricane Stan, that it was a devastating hurricane and it impacted fishing communities in Oaxaca and Chiapas. And so I was majoring in economics, and I decided to start a project, to start an NGO to work with basically improving efficiency of fishing. I quickly learned that there was no future in fishing. Fishing is an extractive activity, and the resources that they're extracting from are not really improving its productivity anytime soon. So there's no way to make the pie bigger. What is the only way to make that pie bigger? It's aquaculture. Then we learned about the horrible impacts of aquaculture, and we decided to focus on innovation. So what's needed in order so that we can get our shrimp? First, we have only basically two sources. The first one is wild catch. And wild catch is, in order to get shrimp, so you see shrimp, they don't swim. They are walking. So they're walking on the seabed. So in order to get these shrimp that are walking, you need to throw a dragging net and get them. And there are no precision nets that take one shrimp one by one. So you basically need to drag everything that comes along. So it's 9 to 15 pounds of other stuff that are needed to be killed for you to get your 1 pound of shrimp. And these are discarded. There's a fancy word for this. It's called bycatch. So shrimp is responsible for 50% of the bycatch in the world. And also, since there is a lot of CO2 stored in the seabed, trawling is responsible for the same amount of emissions as the whole aviation industry, the whole air travel. So you have your other alternative, which is shrimp farming. So shrimp farming relies on a continuous exchange with nature. So then farms tend to place their operations by lagoons in tropical countries, so mangroves. Shrimp farming is responsible for 50% of the mangroves that we have lost in the world. And a hectare of mangrove forest is as efficient, is 5 times as efficient as any other forest in the world at capturing carbon. And then it also uses antibiotics, pesticides, and it throws water, it disposes water into the ocean using it as a toilet, using basically organic matter, these antibiotics, the pesticides, and it creates an imbalance and dead zones and all that. And both sources of shrimp use antibiotics, preservatives, so that it can be frozen 3 to 5 years. So in one of the presentations yesterday, Rob asked, what is the price that we pay for our cheap food? So here you can see the price that we pay for cheap shrimp. So the question was, can we grow shrimp sustainably? So this is our farm in Oaxaca, Mexico. This is the first shrimp farm in the world to grow shrimp without any water exchange on a commercial level. So, and what we do here is that we use microbial communities to capture nitrogen. So the most important reason for shrimp farming to be environmentally harmful, it's because of the water exchange. But nature doesn't have a non-nature reservoir of water that they can use to dilute the nitrogen. So it has created a solution that is basically microbial communities that capture this nitrogen and create protein. Shrimp is a detritivorous animal, so it can feed off of this microbial community. And it increases the amount of fatty acids in the tissue and collagen in the tissue. And also, here we harvest 60 to 100 times more kilograms, more biomass per square meter. So this used to be a peanut farm, so we didn't cut any trees to have our farm. So this is the version 1.0 of our technology. Then we started exporting here to the United States, finding interesting clients such as Chef Jose Andres from Jaleo, that liked our shrimp and paid a nice premium for it because of its sustainability. We don't use any antibiotic. We don't use any chemical. We're just feeding the shrimp and using a little bit of sugar to match the nitrogen with carbon so that they can produce protein. And, but so we were shipping fresh, never frozen shrimp, flying it. So that killed, yeah, I saw the faces. So that killed our logistics. It was horrible logistics. It killed our margins and also killed our sustainability claims. So the question was, can we grow shrimp in the United States? So for 3 years, we have been working on this technology, and our answer is shrimp box. So I could share more schematics and stuff, but here you have, it's the geometry of a shipping container. And these are plug-and-play farms that we manufacture in Mexico. So we build them, and then we ship it here to the United States. We have a farm, this is our farm in Indianapolis, and there's 2 tanks, one on the bottom, one on the top, and we can grow here 1.5 tons of shrimp every year from one of these units. So, and this is basically the same output that an acre of previously mangrove forests in Ecuador would yield. So this is the future. This is how can we make our system more efficient by stacking them so that we don't even need a warehouse. So, and with this, we can improve 60% efficiency in heating, which is about 2/3 of our energy consumption. And I just came from our first harvest in Indianapolis, Indiana, and we had our first successful harvest. And there, we were able, at least on this batch, to have a 1-to-1 feed conversion ratio. So this means that we are converting basically plant-based protein with to shrimp protein. There is one problem that we need to change about, which is the feed. No, that it relies on fish meal and fish oil in ever decreasing amounts, but this is also something that we need to work. So I think that this is an interesting case about a problem that, at least for me, so I've lived in a city, in Mexico City, my whole life before 22, and I would never have thought about all these problems. So what it meant to fishing communities, what was the true cost of shrimp, and that there could be a solution, no? And that there could be an answer to this. So I think that it's also an interesting example of the geography of collaboration. Because if you think about it, so Oaxaca is the poorest state in Mexico. And this technology was developed in Oaxaca. So biotech, the software, the automation was developed there. We manufacture our shrimp boxes in Mexico City. So in 1994, when NAFTA was signed, we thought that the North American bloc would be more integrated. But then China was accepted into the World Trade Organization, and then let's say that there was a pause. But I can tell you, because we manufacture shrimp boxes in Mexico, it's basically the same cost of manufacturing in China than in Mexico City. And I think that this is very interesting, because then we created a technology in Mexico, we manufacture in Mexico City, and we are opening opportunities in the United States, because our business model is to be inclusive. So we are enabling enabling American farmers to diversify their income streams by adding shrimp. And also, we are the only byproduct of our technology. It's basically the microbial community, which we can use to create energy from biogas and also fertilizer. So it mixes well into the food system and allows us to get to a more sustainable food system in that regard. So, and I would just like to finish my my presentation with a question, because I was thinking about because I've been traveling a lot, and then I thought, why am I here? And as Dean said, like just being here for listening to presentations, and it's kind of fun, but I think what is better, and if I think about, because most of these ideas came from some of these conferences, no, mostly farming conferences or other kinds of scientific conferences. So I invite you to please reach out, because I think that maybe if you think that this is something that you could use, or I don't know, or that you can improve, because I'm also here to test my assumptions. Maybe I'm mistaken in something. So please reach out, and I will be happy to have a conversation. So thank you.
Thank you. Hey, thank you both to Daniel and Michael. Tremendous presentations. I do have to say a few things about Daniel, because he's very humble, you can tell. But I had breakfast with him yesterday, and a couple things, 3 things. One, I want a shrimp box, and I'm going to put one in my backyard. I haven't told my wife yet.
Excellent.
2, shrimp is a very unusual animal in that people will pay more per pound the bigger it gets. Think about that. So these jumbo shrimp, which is what he produces, are in great demand, especially since they're live and fresh. That's unheard of. From all the chefs, huge amount of interest from the Chinese culinary group as well. And we could literally be putting these farms of shrimp boxes in enterprise zones in Gary, Indiana, Detroit, Chicago, and feeding the regional, really bringing in, you didn't talk about that shrimp supply chain, which is crazy, and it moves around the world. I thought most shrimp we got was from Thailand and then Vietnam, and he said, yes, that's true, but every couple of years, the shrimps, that whole ecosphere dies out because of this pollution from the cycling of the water. So now it's India and Ecuador, and it could be somewhere else next year. That's a massively long supply chain. If we could localize the supply chain, just like we will with these bioreactors, and basically, if you want to go buy all the microbreweries and convert them to precision fermentation, get some shrimp boxes, we're into the locavore thing in deep, right? So number 3 is 2 weeks ago, Time Magazine recognized Atturaya as one of the top innovations of the year. So I think we're seeing a Kitty Hawk moment right here. Thank you. And by the way, Atturaya in Spanish, I looked it up. I saw it means fish net, is that right?
Yeah, cast net.
Casting net.
Yeah, exactly.
Good, so I'm so excited about this. And you all want to go down to Oaxaca for the winter and go visit. You can actually get the shrimp. Did you say you were going to have some of your first generation product here, too?
Yeah, it was a surprise, but yes. Yeah, it's going to be.
Sorry. So this is seriously, we're going to be able to. Well, you tell us.
Yeah, well, we're just bringing some samples, and I will pick them up after this.
Good. So this is the first generation. 3 months. In 3 months, you can create about 600 pounds of shrimp in one of these boxes. It's awesome. So thank you so much for that. Now, my first real question, though, is to Michael. So your chart with the red bars, from the analysis that you did, showed that the top bars are risk factors are sodium, eat more grains, eat more fruit. At the bottom of the list was people that eat meat, red meat. That's not a risk factor. So number 1, I was really pleased that ice cream wasn't on your list. So I'm safe from that. But am I wrong in assuming that? Okay, I look at that list, and now I go to the steakhouse, I can still order my piece of very nice filet mignon, but I'll just order 3 sides, right? 3 more vegetables, and now I'm on the Planetary Diet. Am I wrong on that?
Well, the Planetary Diet is about, I can't remember exactly, it's about recommended 14 grams of red meat a day, which is about a 6-ounce steak every 11 days. So it's you can do that once, and fruits and vegetables are that powerful that they can mitigate the effects of, the bad effects of saturated fat and meat. Red meat by itself, is a high quality protein and needed. So this data is coming from studies. So you'd have to have a study that showed eating red meat caused that death, and that's a very hard thing to show. And people eating high quality foods you might not see that. What this really showed is that the standard American diet, which is one that the average American eats about 15% of their calories from plant-based whole food, is literally killing us. And so what is it about the standard American diet? Well, about 25% of your calories come from pure sugar, and about 50-60% of your calories come from animal products. And sometimes that's not a very good form of animal products. It may be ice cream. It may be milk is not a favorite of mine, and fish came out pretty well in that study. It doesn't mean that eating the people who live the longest are the communities that have 100% plant-based whole food diet and very little animal products. So it's probably not showing up there the superiority of the more plant-based whole food you eat, the better off you are. But yeah, it does seem that eating a little bit of red meat, eating some regular fish in your diet, and the quotas are a little bit higher, seafood, like shrimp. I'm even going to try some of those shrimp today, by the way.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
So yeah, that's the answer to your question is, yeah, you could probably eat some meat. It's probably a little bit healthier to eat only plant-based, and it's a lot better for the environment if you only eat plant-based. So
yeah.
Health-wise.
So how would we square the planetary diet that you've come up with today, which is based on the current diet, square it with this S-curve, so in 10 years we now have alternative proteins that are designed to maybe take out some of the bad stuff and designed to put in some of the good stuff. Do we then say we can eat whatever we want because the precision fermentation will be helping us and so forth? Does that square in 10 years? Will your plate change, your mix of stuff will change?
Well, I think it'll greatly accelerate. There's a lot of other things we have to do, like decrease food waste, and with the planetary diet, there's still amount of meat production going on that is a high cost to the environment. So if you could replace that red meat with the Impossible Burger meat, that would accelerate the S-curve. But you could probably get, what this data, the EAT Lancet Commission is showing is that we could have that S-curve effect with with shifting our diet, improved production measures, and decreasing half our waste. And there is a better quality to plant protein. There's some evidence around that. Another thing in this diet is, which I didn't mention, is we probably don't need as much protein as most Americans and the FDA recommend. So we can eat diets, and people seem to be thriving on diets that aren't super high in protein, and we haven't maybe really gotten the optimal amounts there. But yeah, and then the other thing is the Impossible Burger, when it first came out, Pat Brown, if he was here, he could add to this. It had about the same amount of saturated fat as a regular burger, 9 grams. If you saw in the Planetary Health diet, you're supposed to eat below 11 grams of saturated fat. So you're supposed to eat between 0 and 11. They came out with a second version of the Impossible Burger, which has 6 grams of saturated fat. So that's a big improvement, a third less.
Good.
And then he has some bowls that look even healthier. So I wish he was here so he could say that. And I think you could move to a lot of meatless dishes that are like these grain bowls. And he has, I think, an Impossible Pork bowl that is meatless, but it has vegetables and rice, whole grain rice, and things like that in it. Mm-hmm. So.
Great. So one question for Daniel, and then I'll open it up. But Daniel, give us a picture. If I was to start I'm going to start one, but what's the optimal number in a farm? what does the inputs look like in terms of labor and energy, so forth. So let's just take an example. Let's say I want to have a shrimp box farm in New Jersey, right? And I don't need to be in a warehouse. Maybe I want to be because there's some value for security and so forth. But how many units would I have, and how much production do I have, and how many people do I need to run it? And what do you do from Oaxaca? I know you're sitting there in your beautiful beachfront villa, just looking with your AI, monitoring everything. But how will this work if I'm the first farm in New Jersey to have this?
So the minimum viable farm is 20 units. That gives year-round production, continuous harvesting every week.
Every 3 months, right, is a cycle?
Yes.
Right, okay.
So, and then you can have continuous relationship with restaurants that need shrimp every week. For 20, you need basically 4 people, and for 100, you need 7 people to run it.
Well, there's some scale economy for you, right there.
Yes.
And is 200 is too much, right? You have to, yeah.
I don't know.
Okay, we'll stick with 100. Yeah.
So the remote monitoring. So we have sensors and we have a software that is cloud-based, and so we don't need to train you to grow shrimp. In 30 hours, we can train you to use the shrimp box. So it's a very low barrier of entry in that regard. And then we use sensors to measure the data. And for 2 cycles, we will have an implant in your facility so that it can be continuously training your people, and you can also be trained at our demo training farm in Indianapolis.
Great. So this is what we call controlled environment agriculture, like vertical farming, right? So it's tremendous. And give us the stats on the comparison of a calf to a cow versus a shrimp to coming out of your shrimp box.
Yeah, that is interesting. So shrimp is amazing at creating protein. It grows 10,000 times its size in 4 months. So you don't have that with a cow, because you would start with something like this and you would end up with something the size of this auditorium probably. A shrimp female lays 150,000 eggs every 6 weeks. There is no hen that can match that. And it converts protein very efficiently.
Good. And we can use the same closed loop structure for other species, right? For fish, for example.
We have worked with tilapia and also with snapper, for instance, but that's far into the future.
Very good. Fascinating.
So a bunch of questions. I don't know.
Oh yeah, questions. Please go ahead. Yeah.
Hi, my name's Mariah Imke, and I'm here with the USDA. And I actually want to make sort of a controversial statement. And I think of the ideas I've heard up here today, I think Dr. Russek's is the one that makes sense, and the other ones are wrong. So if we look a little bit, instead of looking at the future, and we look at the past and what has worked in terms of making more equitable and early adopted technology that benefits the marginal groups in our world, we might look at the work of Norman Borlaug, who didn't transform wheat into some new powder. He transformed the way we produce wheat. And looking at the other big problem we tried for man's eternity to try to solve is the problem of hunger. And in the 19th century, many people thought they had the secret sauce to producing an end to hunger, and they created this broth that could be distilled into a cube and served at soup kitchens. It is now in most of our pantries as bouillon. It did not end hunger, and I don't think Impossible Beef is going to end the climate crisis, so to speak. So I think that I guess, so my comment is a little bit about how do we shift this focus instead of looking at, increasing our processing of food, which we already, a big contributor to our poor health is processed food. How do we make the planetary, planet-based diet more available, accessible, and attractive to everyone? I would love to eat a fresh salad and, tropical fruit every day, but it takes time, it takes money, and it takes skill.
Thanks for your comment. I think that would be a great 1-hour session to go through that. But I love that you bring up a controversial point. It's not about science experiments, it's about doing better with what we have, is your point, right? We only have about a minute, I'm sorry, but next question, please. We'll just get, let's put the questions on the table so we at least have the thoughts.
Yeah. this is a very comprehensive panel, but there's an element that's missing, and that is there's a need for a governance structure. You talked about philosophy, you talked about a framework, you talked about innovation, but just walk into a supermarket and look at all the products with false health claims, and you'll realize we need a governance structure. Now, I don't mean a government agency overseeing. I mean a locally based stakeholder engagement process that brings in people to optimize all the attributes that you folks are talking about. And unless we have that, we're going to see more, quite frankly, garbage in our supermarkets with labels associated with the topics you're talking about today. Mm-hmm. So that is a critical missing element that we need to address.
Yeah. That's another great point. Again, we could do an hour on that. I just want to give everybody a little voice here, so keep going with your questions.
Hi. Are we going to go back and forth? Hi, I'm Pam Cook from Teachers College here at Columbia University. Thank you for great presentations. My comment question is, we heard yesterday from one of the lightning panelists that food systems that are based on profit are not serving people's diets well. How do we make sure with these new technologies that the profit-driven nature isn't taking over the idea of having people eat a planetarily healthy diet?
Well, that's another whole discussion of an hour. Some would argue we need the profit incentive to swing the bat and strike out, as VCs do. 1 in 100 is a winner, right? So that's profit motive. So, but that's a whole other discussion. Great point. Thank you.
I was just going to say really quick, Dr. Rich, if the whole point of extending human life and saving human lives is to, extend the longevity of our species, isn't that maybe bad for the planet?
It's a great question, and I think a lot of people ask it. Just really quickly, I'll say that someone who eats that Planetary Health diet, they do about 1.5 tons of carbon a year, and someone who eats a meat diet is about twice that. So it does add up over the years that you could, on balance, do that. But also, there's something about if a person shifts to a plant-based whole food diet and is a more productive person because they have better health, they're likely to shift in other ways too around the planet if they're motivated enough to go on that diet for things. So you might get a surprise that causing the shifts has some collateral benefits instead of collateral damages, that people live more productive and do other things that are to get us to net zero carbon and things like that.
So I'm going to have to cut it off. I'm sorry, John's giving me the hook, and apologize for not getting any questions, but we do have several other sessions that these ethical issues should come up. Chris, you're going to take some of that with the VC panel. These are great. But I want to thank our two speakers. I particularly want to thank Pat Brown for not showing up because we had more time. And they'll both be available for discussions. Thank you.